I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Mosaic of Wine Series 2. Giving my audience of wine lovers, students and professionals from across the world access to some of the most interesting, successful and influential people working in and around wine. While today's guest, Anne McHale, is perhaps best known as a master of wine who successfully held various roles in the wine industry, I know her first and foremost as an amazing entrepreneur who has successfully developed a niche helping students worldwide via her online programs, most notable of which being Diplomatherapy for WSET diploma students. In today's episode, we hear Anne's early experiences in wine. She discusses the influences from her first role in wine, as well as a later position with Berry Brothers and Rudd. She gives us a Master of Wine program overview, discussing both the challenges her and her fellow MW students faced, and relating this back to current diploma students. She discusses her transition into working in consultancy, developing the Diplomatherapy program, sources of information, ideation, and product creation, before closing on Anne's long-term goals for the program. Enjoy.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lawrence. I am honoured to be breaking records here on the Interpreting Wine podcast with my fourth appearance, I think. And I'm also honoured that you invited me to talk more about my story because, as you say, my previous episodes have centred around tips for diploma students. And I'm sure we'll get onto that a little bit later as well because it's part of my journey. So my earliest memory of wine is actually age 10, sneaking down after my parents had a dinner party and drinking the leftovers on a Sunday morning, which you can imagine was enough to put anybody off for a while. And then I grew up in quite a sort of Catholic family in Northern Ireland, and the tradition was that when you did your confirmation into the Catholic Church at age 11, that you took the pledge, which meant that you didn't drink until you were 18. And I, unlike most of my peers, kept the pledge. And so the next taste of wine I had was on my 18th birthday when my father poured me a glass of champagne. And the truth is that I hated it because it was too dry for my palate. And I remember looking enviously at my sister who was drinking sparkling grape juice. But, you know, it did not take long after that, Lawrence, for me to adjust my palate, I'll be honest. And as we discussed before, when we were preparing for today's episode, it's really the influence of my father that got me into wine in the first place. So all throughout my childhood, he used to talk to me about how he had established the first ever student wine society in Queen's University, Belfast in the late 1960s, at a time when really hardly anyone in Northern Ireland drank wine. They drank gin, beer, whiskey, but there was not a wine drinking culture. And he was privileged enough to discover good wine on a trip to Vienna. So his first ever wine that he tried wasn't until the age of 23 it was kind of at a tasting of the new vintage, and he thinks it was probably an Austrian Riesling, but he can't quite remember the details. And he was absolutely converted from that day onwards. And he went back to Northern Ireland thinking, how can I get wine into this market? So he founded this wine society, and the merchants at the time were very keen to create a new generation of drinkers, wine drinkers. So they fully funded the society, and they drank the very best first growths of Bordeaux. They drank Chateau d'Yquem. They drank top Premier and Grand Crus from Burgundy. And so you can imagine why this was a very important part of his young adulthood. And he shared all of these stories with me growing up. So I was lucky enough to get a place at the University of Cambridge, who had a very flourishing and old wine society. And I immediately joined it in the first week, because I thought, well, what a sophisticated way to drink alcohol. You know, this is not your ordinary student binge drinking session. This is a, you know, very, very posh thing to do. And I was inspired, of course, by my father in doing that. But all of that really was still just like learning a little bit about wine, acquiring an interest in wine. It never occurred to me to work in the industry. And I think that is probably something that the industry needs to get a little bit better at, is reaching out to people and teaching them that wine can be a career. So for me, it happened by accident. I went along to the University Careers Service and I said, well, here's my degree. My degree was in French. What can I do with this? And they said, you could be a teacher, a lawyer, a banker, a management consultant, or you could join the civil service. And I thought, no, to everything. So I went away with absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. And I moved to London with a bunch of friends from university. I scraped together enough to pay the rent for the first 6 weeks or so and just applied for jobs. And I thought, well, my main skill is that I can speak fluent French. So let's apply for jobs in offices where they require a French speaker. And just by coincidence, or maybe it was fate, I don't know, the first job I got was in a small ex-sellers wine agency. They were acting as the middleman between a lot of wineries in France, primarily around the Rhone area, because the company was called Mistral Wines, and wholesalers and retailers in the UK. And they needed an administrator to liaise in French with the wineries. So I got that job. They sent me on my first WSET course, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Amazing. Yeah, that's it's such a nice I would say symmetry, really, in terms of what your dad sort of went over there and did, and almost a little bit, as I sort of spoke earlier about, kind of going your own way. I mean, it sounds, even listening to it again there, it sounds like a bit of an interesting thing, a decision that he made to be in Vienna, to be over in Austria. I mean, do you know how that sort of trip even came to be?
Yes, he was studying his second undergraduate degree in physiology, and he was at a student conference in Vienna. So it was, again, there was no intention for him to discover wine, learn about wine, taste wine. It just happened incidentally. And having decided at the age of 23, because he had tried all the alcohols available in Northern Ireland and didn't like any of them, he had decided to be teetotal and then just overnight abandoned it completely.
So funny, yeah. It's quite funny that we're actually spoken a couple of times about giving up alcohol, haven't we? It's you with the pledge, and your dad with his extended pledge / lapsed pledge. So that again, that may well be a theme that we kind of revisit as we go through. But I'd love you to kind of pick up the story. Really, I think we're really moving now more, it feels, into people / culture, because I'm sure through your career there will be people influencers, but I guess now that you're out there and in the world of work, you're also going to start getting some influences from the companies that you work at, and the types of environments that you're exposed to as well.
My first job in wine was not heavily involved with the product, because I was administering all the paperwork that was involved in running an ex-sellers agency. I did get to know the names of pretty much all the retailers and wholesalers in the whole of the UK, because one of the wines that we represented was Chateau de Beaucastel, and nearly everybody took an allocation of Beaucastel from the Perrin family. So I think that was really valuable to me in my later career, just being really familiar with all the different names of UK wine businesses. The company subscribed to Harper's Wine and Spirit magazine, and I used to read that in my lunch break. This is pre the days of smartphones, so my brain wasn't taken up with endless scrolling of Instagram. I actually read useful content. And what else influenced me there? I did get to improve my French even more, which was just wonderful. I think back on those days, and I used to, pick up the phone to a customer in the UK and jabber away in English, and then 5 seconds later, I'd be on the phone to somebody jabbering away in French, and then switching back between the two just completely with ease. I look back on my younger self with envy in that sense. And I did get more and more involved in the product. As I said, they paid for me to do my first WSET course. So on a Wednesday evening, I used to go down to what was then at Five King's House. I think I was one of the last cohorts to study my level 3 at King's House, which is next to the Vintners Company. Obviously, WSET after that moved over to Bermondsey Street. And so every Wednesday evening, I would get on the Bakerloo line and go down there. And it was... I remember it was a whole new world of knowledge, sensory experience. I still think with fondness of some of the teachers that taught me then. In fact, I sometimes run into a couple of them in the staff room at WSET now when I'm teaching, and remember that they were Michael Buriak, for example. I'm sure some listeners will have been taught by Michael, who taught me for my level 3 all those years ago. So I was there for about a year and a half at Mistral Wines, and then I moved briefly to do about 6 months stint at Wines of New Zealand, where I was the marketing assistant. So that introduced me to a whole other country and their wines. And, it's hard not to be impressed by how dynamic the New Zealand wine industry is and how enthusiastic everyone was. So I have some great memories of trade tastings that I helped coordinate for Wines of New Zealand. And then after that, I joined Berry Brothers and Rudd, which I thought I was joining for a 2-week temp role. So that was in January 2006. And then I ended up staying for 10 years. So, that was just, when I look back on it, it seems like coincidence after coincidence. So you have to wonder, was it meant to be?
Yeah, I love it. I love that, even seeing you remember the French, being able to speak French and like that is such a, it seems like it was wine's good fortune, really, because it almost could have been any industry, right? That might have allowed you to work in French. You could have been importing, exporting. It could have been, you could have been a lost to the wine industry. But no, it's great, and I think it shows as well. Maybe we'll pick up the story with Berry Brothers, but maybe it was that felt like a big enough space, really, a big enough brand, a big enough company for you to be able to kind of spread your wings, really, and as you say, spend that decade or so working your way through, I believe, different roles and maybe some of the different parts of the company.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough when I joined from my temp job, I was there to assist Rebecca Lamont with some of the admin around the events. So she ran what was then known as the wine school and the ticketed events, as opposed to the private and corporate events, which was a separate team. But both teams kind of, used the same spaces in the beautiful historic cellars that had been repurposed for tastings and dinners. But she was kind of doing it all on her own at that stage. And I know you've actually also interviewed, as part of this series, Barbara Drew.
That's
MW,
right, yeah.
Who later became part of our team. And Barbara spoke very fondly of Rebecca. And I have very fond memories of how she mentored me and supported me. And she told me, I think a couple of weeks in, that there was a permanent job going to be her assistant effectively in the department. So that job would involve the administration of all the events, doing all the table plans and the seating, the place cards and the guest lists and printing out the tasting sheets and all of that. And that it would also involve assisting the guests, the hosts at the event. So we had, at the time, lots of MWs in the company who were all kind of roped in to help and speak at this program of events. So we had, Jasper Morris, Alan Griffiths, Mark Pardo. They were amongst the three who were speaking most regularly in the ticketed events program, just showing, using their great expertise that they had in their decades of experience buying from these regions. We also had Simon Field, MW, who was expert in Rhone and Champagne. So we had Burgundy covered Bordeaux, Rhone, Champagne, all the fine wine regions. And I was there to open all the wines in advance before they arrived, check that nothing was corked, and then ask them to check the wines. And then I got to sit at the back of the room and listen to these guys talking about wine. And also, because this was still 2006, and the prices of top claret hadn't gone stratospherically absurd yet, able to drink all the first growths and learn from some of the world's most expert people about these wines. So it was just an amazing time. And I really enjoyed the side of it, of preparing for the events as well. I learned that I was quite organized and good at running events, and I was very pedantic when it came to checking the French accents and checking which was it premier cru, deuxième cru, classé, troisième cru, all of that. So I was good at checking all that. I was accurate. And then I used to get a great feeling of satisfaction as well when somebody would book an event 6 months earlier and told us they were vegan, and then they would arrive at the dinner and they would be presented with the right type of meal for their dietary requirement without anything else having been said in between, because I had communicated it accurately to the chefs, and I found all that very satisfying. So.
I love it. Yeah, I'll actually, I'm tempted to sort of just bend the timeline a little bit now, but simply because I think it's you've gone so deep into the events, painting us that picture of what an event might look like. But yeah, I'd love you to maybe in that maybe even using that same event example, paint us a bit of a picture, including your vegan friend. What were the types of people who were sort of coming along? And again, it could be at a relatively high level. Do you notice any particular differences, in terms of the sort of crowd that was into wine, was being attracted to those sorts of events? I know it's only 20 years ago, but are there any big themes that you think might have changed, over that time?
It's a good question. Because I haven't been much involved in consumer events since I left, which was 9 years ago. I left Berry Brothers and Rudd. I wouldn't be able to comment on how much it's changed, but at the time, we had such a loyal customer base. So it tended to be people that bought their wine at Berry Brothers. So they usually had a cellar plan with the company. They had an account manager that was looking after their purchases, helping them manage what was going to be for drinking, what was for investment, what was going to be laid down, what was for current drinking. And then in order to supplement all of that interest that they had in buying and storing wine, they would come along to our events to get pleasure out of the wine and learn about what they were collecting in their cellar. So that was primarily our audience. So they tended to be, pretty well-heeled people that could afford to invest in wine and lay wine down, and then could also supplement that with buying tickets to our events. And we always aimed to offer, and this is what Rebecca was just brilliant at, offer people a super premium, wonderful experience the second they walked in the door. They could just stop worrying about the outside world. You never even got mobile signal down in those cellars. And we had a superb team of chefs that would just create the most gorgeous little canapes and nibbles to go with the wines in a Tudor tasting. And then obviously a whole menu if it was a dinner. And we had just every conceivable topic covered. So as I stayed in the team and my role grew within the company, I then began to help Rebecca much more with the creation and marketing of the events. We released a twice yearly brochure, which we would launch, and then people could book up for the next several months. And then my role evolved further into teaching and hosting as well. And again, Rebecca was incredibly supportive of me. The first time that I stood up to teach a class about wine, even though I had just finished my WSET diploma, so I had lots of knowledge, but I was incredibly nervous, and she co-taught the class with me so that I could, go into it gently. And that made a huge difference to me because I was quite shy. I hadn't done a lot of public speaking, but I was just so enthused by the topic. And eventually I relaxed into it and I took on more and more of my own hosting duties. And then, of course, I was progressing through the Master of Wine as well. So acquiring more knowledge, more confidence. So yeah, very happy memories.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think it's again it's one of those things that thank you for sharing that, because it's I would imagine that if you're in that sort of consumer setting and you're speaking to Berry's clients who I'm guessing they weren't working in the wine industry, even you standing up there with a freshly minted diploma, you were probably one of the most, or if not the most qualified person in the room, weren't you? It was, and it's, I just think it's interesting sometimes how, and it's not only yourself that said this. A lot of times people have said to me that the more they study wine, the less they feel they know about it, and that maybe they realize the little bits that they don't know. I'm just curious. Do you remember what it was about, giving and leading those type of events that sort of did make you nervous and, maybe did inhibit you a little bit?
It was probably just the fact that I was much younger than everybody in the room. So what age would I have been? I think probably only still 26 when I started to teach rooms full of people who were usually, even though they weren't in the wine industry, they were usually in lots of other professions where they were quite high up in their profession. They'd been collecting wine for a number of years. So it was a bit intimidating for a young person like me to stand up and speak. But of course I did have, the knowledge that I had, the expertise was there to bolster me. It was just about developing the confidence, which I gradually did after I'd been doing it for a while. And then I started to have fun with it, I used to, because around that time as well, I was starting to travel a bit to wine regions. So I developed a bit of a collection of photographs of me in various vineyards. And I used to, joke in my classes, I'm showing you my holiday snaps. And then everybody would get to see a photo of me, at the place where we were tasting the wine, all of that. So I started to have fun with it, relax into it, show my true personality. And it just went really well. Just enjoyed it a lot.
It's a really interesting point, actually, about kind of showing the snaps as well. It's again, it was probably just a fun way to warm people up and just kind of show a little bit of your personality, I guess, as well. But I'll always remember, I've sometimes posted things online about is education, is that what we need, and even sometimes if I've had it in my mind about should I go and do a level 3 or should I dive back into wine education, and I find it a very divisive topic to bring up, actually. But a lot of people, they say education, go for it, get your diploma, go all the way down, and then there's others who are very successful in wine, maybe working slightly more in the hospitality side of things, and sommeliers, or and sometimes even buyers, people who have got a lot of clout. But a lot of them, they're like, just get out there, a little bit like you said there, get out there, visit the vineyard, speak to winemakers, taste. And it strikes me as maybe what you were doing there was kind of almost bringing the two together, because I don't think it necessarily needs to be choosing one or the other. Why can't it be both?
Especially when people aren't in the industry and they're not looking to pass exams. Of course, they want to understand their own wine collections and when they'll be ready to drink, and they want to learn to appreciate wine and taste it and all of that. But they also wanted to have fun. They wanted to come to the class to have a bit of a laugh, and combine both of those things, education and entertainment. So I felt like I was providing them with a bit of entertainment by, and I had stories that I would tell that I knew would always get a laugh and that kind of thing. And occasionally I insert those into my diploma classes, just to liven things up for people as well.
I love it.
Because we have to remember that wine is a fun product.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely another of the topics that I think we'll touch on as well. But I'd love to, and I think it does flow very nicely from kind of where you brought us up to, Anne. You already sort of hinted at having started your Master of Wine, and I believe gained your Master of Wine when you were still at Berry Brothers. In the area of the interview that I like to call expertise, it's true to say that you're very much one of the, or as qualified really as you can be in the field. Take us through a little bit, if it's not too painful, reflections on your own journey as a Master of Wine. I think that's often helpful for a lot of my listeners who are themselves Master of Wine students, or maybe have passed the diploma and are considering taking the next step.
Well, it did take me a year after I passed the diploma to work up the courage to apply for the MW program, because I was terrified by it, to be honest. And I'd already got a taste of what it was like to work full time and then study full time on top of that, and sacrifice your social life, because I was still very young. When I got the diploma, I was 26, and I'd had to cancel various social plans in the months leading up to what's now known as the D3 exam, which was called Unit 3 then, but was still just as scary. And so I thought, do I really want to spend more years? And it could potentially be 10 years, when you see the journeys that some people go through to get the MW. Do I really want to spend all these years sacrificing my weekends, my social life? So it did take me a while to build up to it, but I did, because I suppose if I look back on it, I would never not have done it, because I thought I can probably do this. So why would I not do it? So I did throw myself into it, and it was sort of 50% amazing and 50% very hard, very, very stressful. And, lots of tears were shed. And again, my current self could teach my younger self a lot about the mindset thing around it. I was such a pessimist. If I got a wine wrong in a tasting, I would think, I'm never going to get that wine right again. I didn't understand that there are no mistakes, only lessons.
Yeah.
That's one of my little adages that I use as a wiser older person today, and that I tell my students. And if you misidentify a wine, it's not the end of the world. It just means that perhaps you have a weak point that you need to go away and work on. But when you do go away and work on that, lo and behold, next time you'll spot it. So yeah, it was a bit of a tough journey for me because of that mindset, and always being such a perfectionist, and never really having struggled much academically before. And particularly the tasting exams were just like nothing I'd ever experienced, But, the camaraderie that I had with the other students, the places I got to travel to, the MWs that I got to meet, the producers I got to meet, it was unparalleled in terms of personal and professional development. So I would recommend it to anyone who's in a position to give it a go, to open yourself up to those opportunities and that network that you get by joining.
Yeah, and I think it almost feels as though I've picked up on maybe the first sort of link really back to where I started. And your entrepreneurialism, and I think the services that you currently provide primarily to diploma students. Because again, something that you shared with me was that you didn't sail through the exams, I think, as you've hinted at there, really, and that there were I guess lots of getting things wrong, and needing to recognize them as lessons, and I think it feels as though that was an important realization. As you say there, kind of. Your current self would go back to your earlier self and tell you about the there's no mistakes there, there's only lessons. At which point do you think you sort of started to flip over really, and started to move beyond, as you say, the pessimism into this is actually really useful for me, this is something that is even going to be helpful for me after the MW program?
Yeah, probably. I sort of had a strategy the first time I took the MW exams that I would focus on trying to pass the theory exams at the first attempt. And I did manage to pass those. So that the year after that, when I only had the tasting exams to prepare for, I think that's when I saw a bit of a mindset shift, because that pressure was taken away of having to study for the theory exams. There was a bit more time and a bit more space to just work on those weak points. And having already had a go at the tasting exams the first time, even though I didn't pass them, was also very instructive in terms of teaching me, my lessons, not my mistakes, but my lessons, and what I could work on. So definitely that second go was a much more positive experience. But then, then we had what's now called a research paper, but was a dissertation then, very similar thing, just different name. Then I didn't sail through that either. I submitted it and it came back with, we need this bit worked on more, we need this bit worked on more. So it wasn't a fail, but it was a kind of, we called it a referral. So I had to resubmit it the following year. So that was a bit of a blow as well, because I think you think once you've got through the horrendously difficult MW exams, that's the worst over. But the dissertation/research paper, as it should be, is very academically rigorous. So that's an intensive part of the journey as well.
I love it. And yeah, of course, you did pass. But again, it seems as though we've naturally spoken about challenge there, really. This is always, again, something that, I almost have to tee up some guests to talk about there. But it seems as though with a lot of Masters of Wine, just getting them to talk about the journey, like the challenge, sort of naturally drops out, and I think it's I think even for a lot of students it might be interesting, because I think actually and I can think of even a couple of other recent MWs I've interviewed, Justin Howard Snade and Dercio Viana Jr. They had different challenges that they brought to the fore. Junior was talking about English not being his native tongue, and just that in and of itself being a huge challenge. And Justin was talking about never having really slayed the essay monster really in his mind, and needing to go into work early and do an essay first thing in the morning, and having colleagues that would sort of mark his essays, and in his own words put it back with like a C- or a C+, and drawing out the areas that he could sort of he could improve in. And I think it kind of just goes to show that you're tested in so many different directions, and almost in a way it's like everyone's sort of vulnerability gets exposed, really, doesn't it? And needs to be strengthened, and hopefully, and as I would imagine, coming through that experience on the other side, there's maybe a few scars around that vulnerability, but it's probably a lot stronger than when you join the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a complete range of challenges, and the same applies for diploma students as well. And I always say to students that the most important thing to do right at the beginning of the journey is to work out what your individual areas of strength and weakness are, because it really is different for each person. And there's no point in following kind of cookie cutter standard advice that, you need to make notes on the book in this way and all of that, because you could actually be already great at writing essays, and someone's telling you need to practice 5 past exam questions a week, but actually your time would be much better spent just learning the content. And likewise, the other way around, if you're someone that struggles in exams, it's not so useful for you to learn loads and loads and loads of facts, because then there's a risk that you'll just regurgitate those in the exam, not in the way the examiners want, or that your nerves will cause you to panic and forget all of it anyway. And you would have been better off focusing on strategy and exam technique. So it's really important for people to work out where their weak points are, and where they can where they need to focus.
Yep. No, I absolutely love it. And I think it's again, a fine connection to make back to the diploma. Again, I have a lot of diploma students listening, and again, maybe taking it slightly further back, I'm sure a lot of level 3 students who are considering doing the diploma as well. And, you'd like to think, and I think the numbers do show that there's always got I think a healthy kind of pipeline of people interested in wine and coming through, and, kind of long may it continue, of course. I'd love to, because I believe we're, in the, you kind of standing on that stage and collecting your MW. I believe we're still at the Berry Brothers years, really, and I wonder if maybe we could almost draw a line now and start to connect your role at Berry Brothers, and what followed the MW, really, and then your transition into consultancy. So what was that period of the story like for you, Anne?
So I passed the MW in 2013, and the following year, the company decided that they were going to use me in a kind of a more ambassadorial role. So I was still heavily involved in the ticketed events team, hosting dinners. And by then we had Barbara, of course, to help with the administrative side. So I wasn't doing printing out as many tasting sheets and all of that. I was more doing speaking and hosting. Then in 2014, I was dispatched off to the Berry Brothers offices in Hong Kong and Tokyo. So at that time, we had outposts there. And so I went off on this Asian adventure, which was very exciting for me, and hosted lots of events, did staff training sessions out there, and just, wow, it's just, I still have so many stories from that time. Main one being karaoke with the Japanese team. I've never seen anything like a karaoke bar in Tokyo. Anyway, going off on a tangent. And I think I did 2 or 3 trips to Asia. But then in 2015, it became time for me to look for new options and to move on from Berry Brothers. They did actually offer me a permanent job in the Hong Kong office at that time. But it ended up, just for various reasons, not being right for me to move abroad at that time. So I ended up striking out on my own. And I quite quickly got a consultancy offer from a boutique hotel group called the Doyle Collection. They're an Irish company, and they were looking for a Master of Wine, ideally an Irish Master of Wine, to overhaul and redesign all their wine lists and implement staff training across the hotels. So this was just a huge opportunity for me. I'd never worked in the on-trade before, but I had all the product knowledge needed to do that job. I just needed to learn how the inside of hospitality operation works, and obviously develop contacts in the trade. So I just really enjoyed doing all of that, and I got to traveled over to Ireland quite a lot, and got to travel to the US, where they also had a hotel in Washington DC, but they had 3 hotels in London, which is mostly where I was based. I learned so much, and I ended up working for the Doyle Collection for 4 years, which was just wonderful. Such great people in the company, still friends with some of them today. Then you can guess what happened next when I tell you that my final month of working for Doyle was March 2020.
Yeah, I suspected.
So that just sort of vanished overnight.
Yeah.
Suddenly all the hotels were closed. Nobody needed a wine list anymore. So that was when I did my pivot. And I suppose like everybody was doing a pivot at that time into online stuff. But I had 2 years earlier had the idea, because alongside working for the Doyle Collection, it wasn't a full-time role. So I was still hosting corporate events. I was still teaching WSET, and I was teaching diploma students at the London School. And so in about 2018, I remember I was coming across London Bridge after having been teaching diploma students for the day. And I suddenly had this vision. I'm going to start an online community to support people. Whoa, and I had this idea, and it was just like, wow, light bulb moment. I didn't do it for 2 more years, but I did do it because I could see that there was a gap between all the knowledge that these amazing students were acquiring and then how they were applying it in the exams. And particularly if you're from outside the UK and you're not studying in London, which is where there's the most concentration of, expert teachers and wines from all over the world available, etc. Particularly if you're outside that kind of concentrated environment, it can be quite bewildering to work out what exactly the examiners want you to write in the exams. There's a big leap from the way the book's written to the way you present it in the exam. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start something to bridge this gap. And eventually in March 2020, I had the kick that I needed because I'd lost my other work. And so that's when Diplomatherapy was born. In fact, 5 years ago, as we record this, I'm still planning to put out a post about it soon.
Wow. Oh, it's a big announcement then, and happy birthday and congratulations. And take us back, because again, it's even though March 2020 feels like a lifetime ago, it is only 5 years ago. Do you remember? I mean, I know there was a lot of other things happening at the time, not least that you'd sort of lost what was happening with Dora collection, and it's probably other uncertainties, other sort of feelings, brought up by that. But yeah, maybe again at a relatively high level. Do you remember what were the first steps, or the first things that you chose to put in place or chose to focus on? Because again, you really strike me as a very accomplished entrepreneur and somebody who I would say is, as all entrepreneurs are, is amazing at just sort of making products and making services and making experiences almost out of your mind, really, out of fresh air. But how was that at the start? Because it sounded as though you maybe hadn't had a sort of a strong entrepreneurial influence, and maybe you were needing to kind of learn as you were pivoting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I started out doing Diplomatherapy as live sessions on Zoom. And basically in each session, just imparting some piece of wisdom about how to study effectively and how to apply that in the exams. And then the next time that I was ready to launch Diplomatherapy, I suddenly thought, hold on a minute, this would be better positioned and all put together as a kind of a course that people can study in their own time and then get support from me with questions and how to apply my teachings to specific topics. So I invested in a course called Create Awesome Online Courses, quite meta.
Yeah.
Bought a course about courses. And that showed me how to record and host and then market Diplomatherapy as a proper digital course. So the second time I launched it, that's the way I did it. And then we had a Facebook group where people could ask me questions. I did live Q&As in there, but they could go and review the Diplomatherapy content as many times as they needed to. And it was, I really did create it as a kind of an arc of, from the beginning, here's my philosophy on studying for this. And then here's how to study for the tasting, part 1 and 2. Here's how to study for the theory, part 1 and 2, and then lots of bonus material. And that's kind of the format that Diplomatherapy is still in. And people find that core content, which was all my years of wisdom kind of distilled into this strategic approach. I think people still find it very helpful and reassuring when they watch it. Yeah, so it's just grown since then.
Yeah, and again, I think this will be very helpful for me, certainly, and maybe helpful for some of the people listening as well. But was it actually then investing in that course, the launching online courses course? Was it actually that you think that was a key component of, as it sounds like it, getting a lot of things really right, or at least 80% or 70% right first time?
Yeah, definitely. It's always much more efficient to learn from someone who's been through the thing that you're trying to do, rather than do it all by trial and error, which is what I'm then saying to my students, don't waste all this time with trial and error. Come and I'll support you. I've been there. I've made those mistakes. My students have been there and made those mistakes. We can help you avoid making those mistakes. And that's what I did with the Create Awesome online courses as well. So I'm a big fan of investing in expertise. I have lots of experts in my life that I pay to help me with various things, not least my personal trainer to help me know what to do in the gym. So yeah, I'm a big fan of hiring coaches and helpers, and as I say, people who've been through the trial and error.
I love it. And I'm not sure that we've spoken too much about this, but I've been completely inspired this year by my experiences over in Oregon, and putting this out there on the podcast as well makes it real. But I've actually for the first time in my life, I've started researching the process, seriously researching the process to write a book, because I think actually, getting a lot of that knowledge that people seem to be looking for in terms of running events at wineries and differentiating themselves from other wineries in what they might see as a competitive market. I see that as a really as a valuable resource to be able to get that knowledge and almost get that out there into lots of people's hands. And I'm curious on both sides there, like have you found as an entrepreneur, as somebody really doing your own thing, have you found a lot of books on the topic to be useful? Have you found that as well as the courses and the coaches? Have you found reading and experts in their field to be useful as well?
Definitely. I've read lots of books. I know you and I are both super fans of Daniel Priestley, Lawrence. And I've read a couple of Daniel's books, and I have various. I'm just glancing over at my bookshelf here, and lots of them are business books. And I would say I'll also, over the years, I've been following various people, reading people's newsletters, blogs, following them on Twitter before lots of people left Twitter. I've been really into it. Oh, and podcasts, of course, Lawrence.
Yeah.
I've listened to lots of podcasts about online business and been inspired by people there. So, but I'm not going to let you get away without making that a big promise to everyone listening. You're going to write a book, right?
It's already started. yeah, exactly. And if they're I'm already in conversation with some of the people who are in the audience for my talk, and it's interesting. Yeah, this is now getting really meta. I think it's what I'm learning on that topic is just to try to teach the contents of the book almost while you're writing it and kind of before it's ready. I don't know if that was your experience with Diplomatherapy as well, but it's just, getting out there, having those conversations, and it won't always flow. I expect there to be some, elements that maybe I can't help people with, or that my processes don't exactly work for. But, I think just putting yourself in that situation to be, vulnerable in a way, but going in there with I think the right intention, to teach, to learn, have a two-way conversation. That feels like, at this very early stage of the book, that feels like the way to start to build it up and, let it sort of, go from an idea, which is, is such a sort of a delicate thing, to start to actually develop and take on a life of its own.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see it.
Amazing. And so just in summary, then, what I'm sort of getting from that, I think, definitely there's an element around, you've grown your skill as an entrepreneur. You've been bringing in different resources, primarily paid resources, be those courses, be those coaches, be those, say different books, or sometimes even getting that support for free through podcasts. Again, maybe bring us up to date, because I know that you've said there in your own words that it was sort of formed very early on. But my understanding is that actually the Diplomatherapy universe is actually still growing, and that you are actually still going through this loop, this kind of creation loop, really, of bringing out new products and new services. So maybe bring us right up to date with something quite new, and maybe again, talk us through that process from ideation, from the light bulb moment right the way through to how it showed up in the world and how it was received.
Wow. Okay. Well, one thing that I have done since launching Diplomatherapy is that I have added, as a kind of a separate but complementary, if you like, type of service, is to collaborate with guest experts from my network. So I had that light bulb moment, I think, early in 2023, and kind of brings it full circle, actually, because I touched upon when I was a young person in Berry Brothers, sitting at the back of the room listening to Jasper Morris and Alan Griffiths talk about Burgundy and Bordeaux. And I sort of had kept in touch with both of them after I left Berry Brothers. And so I decided to reach out to them in early 2023 to ask if they would consider collaborating with me on a guest expert series. And I also reached out to Tim Atkin, with whom I'd done some Instagram lives during the pandemic to keep us and our followers entertained. So that first guest expert series aimed at D3 students started in April 2023, and we covered Bordeaux, Burgundy and Chile. And since then, I have continued to develop and grow the guest expert series. So those are workshops that are separate from Diplomatherapy, but all my Diplomatherapy members get a discount on anything extra that I run, and then it's optional whether or not they want to join it. So that's one of the new things I've added, and that then evolved into creating a course on D2 with Alan Griffiths, who has decades of experience in the business of wine, and he can add so much colour and context to the textbook. So we recorded that course together in summer 2024, but it's still available. And I plan to do one on viticulture and vinification with Jasper Morris this summer. So look out for that if you're coming up to starting your diploma and will need some support with D1, because the textbooks are brilliant. But, sometimes we just need that further explanation, that context, and some examples from someone who's been there and done it to help bring it alive. That's been so enjoyable collaborating with people. And I know there are still so many more people that I can reach out to collaborate with. That's an example. I'm actually about to launch my first podcast as well. It's going to be a private podcast, so just for members of my community, free, but not publicly available. And that will be with my diploma tips and tricks in there. So look out for that, Lawrence. I know you've been very encouraging about anyone getting into the podcast space, so I thank you for that encouragement.
Yeah, totally. And I think I'm on your mailing list. I think I'm an interloper, a non-diploma subscriber, and you haven't kicked me off yet. So hopefully I get an invite at some point. But I'm not. I mean, it's great that you've given us the kind of 360 really there on the guest expert masterclasses. And I'm curious, to even just delve slightly deeper there on there and just understand was it another London Bridge light bulb moment to come up with that, or would you say you've now in essence again, now that you're maybe, you're getting in the repetitions, not only in the gym, but, with those different rounds of students coming through, is there a muscle that you're sort of developing that's like, okay, I've had 3 people asking me about this topic, and, somebody asked me about that last week and that sort of thing. Where are these ideas now sort of coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the D1 and the D2 ideas came from the fact that up until recently, I was offering support with D3, 4, 5, and 6, but not D1 and 2. And then more and more people started to ask, do you have anything for D2? Do you have anything for D1? So yes, that's a good example of where those ideas were sparked by direct contact with students. In terms of the idea to do things with guest experts, that probably came from a business program that I was a member of. So in a way, it was a little bit like Diplomatherapy. I signed up to this online membership where I could ask advice on business matters, and they would bring in guest experts. And that's what gave me the idea initially for that.
Yeah.
But I love having new ideas. It's so exciting.
I think it is. And if you're anything like me, it's just, I think seeing an idea come to fruition. And it was, again, in the research for the book, I was listening to a guy from the state. I always get his name wrong. I think his name is Rob Fitzpatrick, but I could be wrong. I'll correct myself if needs be. But he's written, and the book I'm reading at the moment is called Write Useful Books, and he's got quite a slim book, but a whole sort of process around that. And it was just really interesting hearing him on this podcast talking about he's published 3 books, I believe, at this stage, but he'd sort of killed off another additional 5 books, so he'd sort of started 8 books, and he'd finished and published 3 of them, but the other 5 are sort of in this other space. And what I really liked as well, that he kind of re-emphasized. He said, look, those other 5 that I haven't published, they're not wasted. They might turn into a paid community, or they might turn into a talk that I deliver, or that there's always that sort of thing. And I'm just curious, are there in essence, are there other things that are sort of on the cutting room floor, of Anne McHale's kitchen?
Yes. Yes, I'm fizzing with ideas all the time and lacking the time to implement all of them. I've actually, for 3 years now, had an embryonic course, which is a spin-off of Diplomatherapy, called 3 Therapy, for level 3 students. So this is how you study strategically for level 3, and this is how you apply strategy in the exam, because too many people don't pass the theory part of level 3. And that's been that's been in embryonic form for years. So if anyone listening to this wants me to crack on and create 3 Therapy and hurry up because you're taking level 3 next year, then let me know. Reach out and give me some encouragement to finish it.
I'll share the info from my man as well. Maybe get your first early access beta testers early on. That might be interesting. I love it. So yeah, I'm sure as well other ideas come, and maybe they don't see the light of day. But I think that's one of the most incredible things about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, is that these ideas, they have to come from somewhere, and it's like, okay, you are then taking control of this mission that oftentimes at the start no one else sees, or no one else is really sort of talking about, but you're putting in that time and sort of taking it through. And I just think huge congratulations on doing that with Diplomatherapy. And I from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing online, people are getting a huge amount of value from that. So it's really brilliant to see that. And I one of the reasons that I'm bringing up the topic as well is I hope it's an inspiration for others in wine. I think there's for me there is a need for independent thinking. And again, in all industries. But I just wonder if again, like I try to give it a specific example. I just wonder if sometimes when it comes to media and wine, people just conflate that now. And I'm talking about maybe regions or brands, that they just conflate media with, oh, we've got an Instagram page, and we're doing stuff on Instagram. Whereas it's like, okay, you could start a podcast, you could use audio in a different way. You could write a book, you could make a course. There are all these, I think, different channels that people have to kind of get their knowledge out there. But it does, I think it needs just that kind of, I call it the entrepreneurial energy, really, to just imagine that it could be something different, and you could create something out there. And I hope this is maybe inspiring for some others out there who I think wine needs new channels, and it needs to get new people through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love doing it. I think, I find my niche. I love showing up on Instagram. I love creating helpful content for people. And I even love putting together the presentations for my Diplomatherapy members when we do our live classes on D3. I just get into a flow state. And I mean, what a total nerd. I actually like putting together an essay plan for D3. What's wrong with me? But no, I really do love it. And I love hearing from students when they pass. It's just the best feeling ever. It really is. Knowing that they're going to get those lovely celebratory moments and congratulate themselves on their achievements. It's the best. Great. I find a sense of purpose.
I love it, which kind of perfectly brings us to purpose and bigger impact. And I think the thing that I didn't want to lead on this, because I didn't feel it was the right sort of place to start. But the other word, as well as being a great entrepreneur, the other word and the other sort of vibe that I always get from you and from your content as well is a great sense of fun as well. And it almost, and almost I can't help but think about, the content that you've put out over the years, around a lot of it in the gym with you sort of, red faced and tagging your personal trainer and, just really, making these huge, fun videos, really entertaining videos. And I don't really have a question about it, but I'm just curious where did that start from, and what was the reaction like, when you started, deviating a little bit and, going down this sort of non-wine content path. And as a master of wine, you should be, doing only wine content, surely.
Isn't that how you first found me, Lawrence? I have this memory that I think we became friends in 2019, and you contacted me because you'd seen a video of me lifting wine bottles in the gym or something.
Yeah, I was struggling to remember the title of the video, but it was that one. It was that one.
It was a wine lover's torture or something like that. I actually filmed videos on YouTube. If anybody wants to Google this, I'm sure they're going to find them. They're quite old now. I did one in 2017 and one in 2018 with two different personal trainers that I hired, essentially to help me offset my absolute love of food and wine because I was starting to burst out of my clothes, so I had to do something about it. When did I get the idea? Well, 2017, I filmed that first video, and it honestly just began for fun. I was with my personal trainer, Kyle, and he was making me do some kind of evil exercise. And I remember thinking, it'd be fun to do this with a magnum of wine. And then I had the idea of us filming that together. And he was up for it. So we did it. And then I did one the following year with my new PT. I moved areas, so I had to go away from Kyle, and then I hired Laura. And I asked her if she was up for doing the sequel, and she said she was. So I didn't have any goal at that stage. I didn't aim to become some kind of wine and fitness influencer or start a new Instagram channel talking about my battle, my battle to stay fitting into my clothes. I just did it for fun, honestly. And I really enjoyed it. I still chuckle when I watch those videos. There wasn't really a reason behind it. I suppose it was showing my true personality. I do have a genuine passion and fondness for enjoying good wine. It just gives me so much pleasure in my life. And at the same time, I'm also aware that, it is alcohol. It has a lot of calories in it. And we do have to be a little careful with how much we drink and how we moderate our consumption. So it was I just wanted to convey that part of me, that's interested in all those things.
Yeah, I love it. But I think that for me, there's almost like a what would you say, kind of a line through, or there's definite echoes almost of those early videos. I think in the content that you put out right now, when you're putting up your sunset, or when you're the last one I think that made me laugh was when you're on holiday and then you're tagging your personal trainer and you're like, okay, this is gonna cost me when I come back. And I think it's brilliant. I'll just always echo and build up things that I love to see, and it's like, of course you've got to do you, and you've got to find your own niche in a way, and find your own way to kind of show your personality. But I totally get what you're doing. I totally love what you're doing, and I think it absolutely adds to the rest of it. It adds to all the other things that you're putting out there, and for me, it doesn't detract in any way at all from any of the other serious stuff that you're putting out there.
Oh, thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, I also like to put my slippers on Instagram, so anyone who wants to see my slippers in the winter can watch that. Okay,
I've missed that one. that one's passed me by. So that's a good. Well, again, we're perfectly in tune here, because I was really in closing. I was going to invite you to share your coordinates online. So where do we go to get some slipper videos or posts?
Yep. Well, hopefully you can put a couple of links in the show notes as well. But the main place to find me is my website, which is annemchale.com, ANNEMCHALE.com. And there you'll find a section for WSET diploma students that will tell you all the ways I can help you. If you are a WSET diploma student, then I'd love you to join my weekly email newsletter. I start by sending you out a 7-day series of free tips, and then I'm in your inbox regularly telling you my news and also giving you more tips on study strategy. So you'll find, if maybe you can put that link in the show notes to join the email list, Lawrence, and people can find me there. I'm also on Instagram, where I post my slippers and personal trainer, but also lots of helpful tips for diploma students and interesting wines that I'm drinking. And I've been running some fun polls in my stories recently, finding out who's a fan of boxed wine, that kind of thing. I just like to have fun with it and give people a little glimpse into what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis and engage with people. I've actually made loads of new friends on Instagram. You know, it's a great place for networking. And then LinkedIn, I'm getting more and more into. I think that's a really interesting space for conversations. So find me on all those platforms, and I'd love to connect with you there. So even if you're not a diploma student, but want to connect with me on socials, then please do that.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Anne McHale, Master of Wine. Do visit annemchale.com, the link is below, to learn more about her various offerings and find her main social media handles. And of course, why not reach out to Anne to let her know what you thought of the episode and ask any questions it might have raised. Next time on Interpreting Wine, Mosaic of Wine Series 2 in episode 584, I'll be speaking with Christina Pickard, writer-at-large for Wine Enthusiast. Make sure you're subscribed to be alerted when that episode goes live. And if you're not already, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter X, or email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.